Welcome, everybody, to a Thursday edition of UFO Man Live. My name is Tim, or UFO Man. My co-host for this evening is Tom Reed from the famous Berkshire UFO encounter in Sheffield, Massachusetts. Tonight, we have three very special guests, the intrepid Caroline Cory from A Tear in the Sky, David Mason, and David Altman. Please welcome them to the panel. Okay.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. Good to be here.
Thanks.
You're more than welcome. Everyone, I'm going to have you tell a little bit about yourself so everybody in the chat knows a little bit about you before we get into the bulk of the conversation. So, Tom, tell a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Unsolved Mysteries did an episode of our family's incident, which they rebranded. Actually, it was called the Berkshire's UFO. And we have a park in Massachusetts that's kind of originally dedicated to my late father, who took the case involving our family to the UN in 1992. And so we made a form of UFO history, and we're kind of proud of that.
David Mason, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I was the guy who brought all the inventions and measurement equipment, thermal cameras in the movie A Tear in the Sky. So everything you see on the rooftops, and I provided not only the inventions, but I also did the analysis on the FLIR videos that we took in that expedition.
Okay. David Altman, your turn.
Hey. Okay. So I work in TV, mostly doing production and consultant work on different UFO type shows. I'm also in the music business a little bit. Right now, I'm tour managing for actor Cory Feldman and his band. And in my spare time, pretty much deal with my UFO obsession. And I also appear in A Tear in the Sky.
Cool. Caroline, we've had you on before, but can you please let everyone know a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm a filmmaker and what people call an experiencer. Since I was very young, I would have all sorts of, paranormal experiences, UFO sightings, contact experiences and things like that. And that's how I got into this field. And I started making films. And my latest film is A Tear in the Sky, which has David Mason, David Altman, and a few others in it. Everybody should watch it.
Yes, it's an excellent film. I've actually seen it 5 times, by the way. And
Wow.
I can honestly say I learn something new every time I watch it, because it's kind of like I missed a piece here or a piece there because I'm focusing on something else. But it is a fantastic film. What you caught, some of it was things I've seen before, but not necessarily the same shape, like your thermal footage, David Mason. Mm-hmm. But in regards to like the Tic Tac footage in the movie, I actually have seen that before, personally, and quite recently, actually. Had a couple UFO sightings a couple days ago, and it's just phenomenal. If people would look up, they'd see more of what's going on, because there's so much that they don't realize. I mean, cell phones take up way too much time for people. So my first question of the night is going to be for David Altman. David, how did you get involved with UAPX to begin with, and what made you think about getting the guys convinced to go to Catalina Island?
Okay, so how I became involved with them. I was working with David O'Leary, who is the writer from the TV series Project Blue Book on History Channel, and we had went to a UFO conference. We went to MegaCon in Laughlin a couple years ago, and that's when I first met Kevin Day. I was already aware of the Nimitz encounter and everything that happened, and went there, met Kevin. Kevin and I became friends like right off the bat, and we stayed in touch afterwards. And he gave me a call one day and asked me to help him with some media requests that he was dealing with. So I helped him deal with that. And then after he had formed UAPX, he said, you know a lot about UFOs and you know a lot about the media, stuff. So why don't you join our team and you can handle all of our media and, be one of our researchers. And that's how that happened. It didn't take any convincing to get them to go to Catalina Island at all. Like they were already there before I finished my sentence. So,
Wow.
yeah, that was, we had always planned to go there. That was going to be our even if this wasn't a movie, we were still doing this expedition. We were doing this. It wasn't like we did this just for the movie. We were already had all this planned. I mean, it's kind of obvious in the time frame that we shot the movie, because if we didn't already have stuff going on, it would have taken a lot longer to produce that movie.
Right.
The only thing that was going to slow us down was each other, because we had never worked with each other before. Only a few of us had ever met in person. Everybody else was through Zoom,
Right.
So, yeah, and that's how that began.
Okay. Tom, you're next in the question lineup.
You want me to ask a question?
Yep.
Okay, so are you three going to make a second film? Are you going to do some of the because the first one was, okay, right? So I would like to see a second one, and I know a lot of other people would too, because it was extraordinary. And like I told Caroline before, what you caught in 1 week speaks loudly of what the United States or our government must have already known and had for years, because they have more advanced equipment than we do, and they've been tracking this stuff for decades.
And let me just add there that it's not only what we caught, but there's stuff that we saw that isn't in the movie.
Yeah.
So there was even more. So it wasn't like, it was the whole time.
Yeah, I mean,
but I'll let Caroline answer your question.
Okay.
Yeah. So, because this was the very first time we learned so much, and even for a first time, when I think about it in hindsight, it's a miracle in 5 days that we captured so much on tape. And also, like Dave Altman just said, more stuff that we didn't even share in the film. So there's no question that we are on the right track. And because we ended up with very important data that, as you were saying, even the US government saying they don't have, which they probably do, but anyway, that we definitely need to follow up. So we are planning a follow-up. I can't share all the details right now, because first of all, we're still in the process of, figuring out how and where and things like that. But there's definitely follow-up that's going to be that much more amazing, because all the problems and the mistakes or whatever that we encountered are going to be looked at, and we're going to prepare much better for the next one. So stay tuned. I can't share the details, but it's going to be 10 times, if not more, better.
Okay, so I got a follow-up question then. So is it going to include a lot of footage over water?
Yeah, some of it. I mean, first of all, we don't know what footage we're going to capture, but yeah, some of it.
I got a great name for you: a tear in the sea.
Yeah. Well, it's a whole different thing to do it. Actually, just for you to know, originally we were thinking of doing something on a boat and underwater, but it was like I said, it was the first time, no one's ever worked together
And it
before.
was super expensive for all those boats.
Expensive, but also for the equipment. David Mason can
Yeah.
tell you, like it's wobbly,
yeah.
it's not stable, it affects not just functionality, the collection of data, but also the equipment itself to be on the ocean. And so we knew that was going to be a disaster, so we just didn't even bother.
Right. I do expect also the plane was quite expensive as well. The one you were scoping out your sites with, I saw that in the film. I was like, oh wow.
Production value, baby.
Yeah. Yep. But I have to say that the things that you captured were legitimate in my mind, because I've seen some of the same things. Not exactly, but some of the same things. I've never seen a portal like you guys captured.
Alleged possible portal.
Okay, alleged possible portal.
I don't
but
know. We don't know what it is.
Right, it's a huh moment. Yeah, but it does look like a hole with stuff coming out of it. I mean,
Yep.
here it is. I mean, can you explain this a little bit, any of you?
I'll explain it because David Mason didn't work on this particular footage, right, David? Did you want
That's
me to?
right. I didn't have the data, so go ahead and take it, Carolyn.
Yeah, so this one was captured with the UFO DAP system, which is a CCD camera, actually, but in high definition. This is a high definition camera. And basically what happened is we saw some sort of a cloud, that kind of opened and closed very, very fast. But these little dots, those bright dots that you see, they seem to come out of it. And in fact, when that cloud closed, there are a few dots, especially one that's very, very visible in the film, that kind of pop out of that cloud. So, we're working, as you know, with hardcore scientists. So the first thing, they're not going to jump to the conclusion and say, hey, we found a wormhole. Obviously, they're going to research every single possibility. And so this was not lights, this was not radiation, because radiation would have splattered all over the frame. It wouldn't have done what it did in the picture. It didn't match anything that was out there checking with NASA, with all sorts of organizations. And the radar matched exactly the time and the location of this wormhole thing, and detected reflective objects. So these little dots are actual objects. The radar is not going to pick up on radiation. And so that's what makes this crazy. We're calling it a portal, we're calling it a wormhole because it just opens and closes and stuff comes out of it. But of course, to this day, we don't have one scientist, not one, that can give us a plausible explanation. Just some sort of, oh, well, we've seen this, somewhere, or this is an atmospheric phenomenon when this and that, nothing. So it's a real mystery, and that's what makes this very, very crazy. And I'll save another surprise maybe down at the end of this this conversation. I'll tell you more about it.
Okay. It's very interesting to know so much about it because I did see the film and I did see that one object pop out of the cloud. It looked like it had come out, backed in a little bit, and then popped out. It was the only one that showed signs of movement. The other ones were just like pictured in the middle. One thing I remember from the film is one of the researchers said it would have taken 700 to 800 mile an hour winds to close that hole up in the time that it closed. And that's kind of unnatural, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was saying, that it doesn't match any sort of phenomenon that we know of. Okay, so that's why it is definitely some sort of anomaly. It's not a camera glitch. I mean, that's the first thing that we check is a camera glitch. And so what is it? You know, and so again, maybe I'll just tell you. Shall I tell them, David?
I don't even know what you're talking about, so tell me.
Well, basically it's like I said, even we've shared it with many people and experts and scientists. Nobody can tell us what it is, but also we try to acquire satellite images of that exact time, those coordinates, that location. And basically we contacted several governmental government agencies, but also private satellite companies. And long story short, either they don't have it because satellites are not always there, or they have it but they won't share it. But even through the Freedom of Information Act, we asked for those satellite images, and basically they came back and they said, the reconnaissance office came back and said, I mean, we have the letter, and they said, we do have the satellite images of this time, these coordinates, and it's FOIA exempt, meaning classified.
Oh, yeah. Well, hopefully in the future here, we'll get past that classification system and get the truth. David, I have a question for you, David Mason, this time.
Go ahead.
Um, um, can you break down a little bit about the technology you designed and what its purposes were?
Okay, well, each device that I designed was done for the purpose of both detection and possible communication of with this phenomenon that has been observed for many decades. So the first device was actually the one I came out with in 1981, which is the photodial binoculars, and I built those things back then. And I built them because there were many UFO accounts of people reporting UFOs that were pulsing in the sky with lights. And I often thought as a kid, I said, this has got to be information because they wouldn't need lights to see where they're going. They wouldn't need lights for propulsion. It's got to be communication. So I made these binoculars that converted light into sound, showed them off to my friends and family, and they're still around. They still remember all that stuff that I did. And then the later development was the night vision light to sound, different technology and methodology of converting it. And that takes a very low light that you see in the night sky and also converts that to sound. It's extremely sensitive. This was shown. And then another invention is a thermal camera that I re-engineered that takes long wave infrared or cold temperatures and then converts that to sound. And that in an example of that, I pointed that at a bird flock, and I could hear the temperatures differences of the wings of the birds to hear the variation of temperature based on their heat. And so it's a very sensitive device, and it's a new device. And I designed that because of the phenomenon that I've recorded in FLIR. There's been some objects that appear to be pulsing, like a sphere that just sort of pulses, and it measured like minus 40 Fahrenheit. So I figured there's got to be information in that, and to have a device to be able to detect that and record it. And then these devices can be connected to any kind of an analytical device. You can just record it and hook it to an oscilloscope or a spectrum analyzer or FFT analyzer. And then also connected to this other device I designed is a lightwave transmitter. And in the movie, you'll see that three-way lens system. And what that is a spread spectrum lightwave transmitter. It transmits ultraviolet, and then center frequency where it does full spectrum or visible spectrum, but it's not really quite ultraviolet in that one, and then infrared. And by running these different transmitters, I'm able to put different data sets on each one. So you could it's like having a triple spectrum radio stations where you've got different frequencies. But this transmitter, it broadcasts light in frequency modulation and amplitude modulation. So it's like an AM, FM, system. And you can put whatever data sets you want to, whether it's music or if you want to put numbers on it or whatever. And we were, in the movie, we were transmitting, Carolyn had her music. I had my solo guitar music. I play solo guitar and recorded compositions. And we weren't trying to self-promote our music. We were just trying to put something out there that wasn't copyrighted by somebody else. So we didn't want to have those issues. And then every now and then I would transmit the sounds of whales and dolphins. Now, I wasn't trying to copy Star Trek 4. What I was looking at was the fact that whales and dolphins have been on this planet for many millions of years, and they've got very large brains. And if we're transmitting the sounds of these animals, I don't want to call them animals. I shouldn't say that. That's really an insult. If we're transmitting the sounds of whales and dolphins, we're sending the message that we hold a different species other than ourselves in high regard. And it's also sending the message that we accept species that don't look like us. And I think that's important, because I think the approach to us is reluctant because of our reaction to appearances. So if these things have 3 heads and 6 eyes, it might frighten us. So if we show that we accept other different looking species and hold them in higher regard, it would be better. And I also want to paraphrase that I did not just arbitrarily transmit these recordings. I consulted with somebody who provided me recordings of whales and dolphins that were in a happy state, not in a holding tank and claiming that they were, please get me out of this tank, because you don't know what language they're using. And some people say, oh, you need to speak on a microphone. Well, English is not the language of the world. And I don't believe computer language would mean anything to them, because all of our computer language changes over the years. So the old stuff becomes garbage. So trying to do something different to implore a response. And then one of the other things we were doing is I had a device, a receiver that would receive constantly modulated light from the sky, and we were rebroadcasting it back out, so that if something was trying to communicate with us, we would at least send it back to them to show that we're trying to respond to them in some way. Because the likelihood is, if they do give us information over light, we're not going to understand it. It's going to go over our heads.
Right. The picture I have that I want to show is of you standing by a piece of equipment, and this was very interesting to me.
Yeah. He used to have it in his room where he is right now. I don't see it.
It's downstairs. I was working on some other stuff. So yeah, that's the triple spectrum transmitter. So one is a ultraviolet transmitter. The other, the one in the center, is the visible spectrum, and the other one's the infrared spectrum. And then the camera, and then that blue camera you see is the one that converts heat or cold temperatures into sound. Awesome. And then that was the really hard creation, because I had to take a perfectly good working thermal imaging camera, and I had this crazy idea of making it do something different and re-engineer it and 80% of that circuitry within that camera is my own design, and making it work. And I was really surprised at how well it worked after I got done. I was kind of pessimistic of the results I would get, but I was very, very happy with what I got out of it. And it speaks volumes of my knowledge of thermal cameras and thermography. So if somebody says, oh, this guy doesn't know how to run a thermal camera, I'm going to ask them, do you engineer electronic circuits within these thermal cameras? And, right. I can guarantee you they don't.
Tom, you got a question?
Yeah, actually, I got a couple. So with that, with your experience, when you experienced that refraction, when you had the cold object and it just kind of disappeared in the sky,
yeah,
what happened on your camera to show, what do they call it? Endorphmic or something like that? When it's cold air, when something cold disappears or just
endothermic.
That's it.
That was, to me, that was the strangest thing we recorded, because I've often wondered, whenever I've recorded things in thermography, they're always a little bit above, even though I've measured things that measured down to like -80 Fahrenheit. Okay. never had something that went negative with respect to its environment.
Right.
And when I first saw this thing, I'm going, this is, is that a camera anomaly? It was over several pixels. There were gradients around the pixels, so that eliminates, just one offending pixel. So it means that it was something that occurred in that zone. And in thermography, the microbolometer, you think of it as a bunch of miniature thermometers, but they're actually vanadium cells. They, if they're struck with, say, like a really powerful cosmic ray, it will increase in temperature momentarily, not decrease.
Right.
So it really goes against the laws of physics. And this is what really has me puzzled, because not only did we have something get colder momentarily, it had gradients around the pixels, and it had variable persistence, meaning it had to be something in front of the camera at a great distance because it was focused, and it had to be cold momentarily, and then it had to just manifest or disappear.
Okay, so what happened on your end with when you were recording that, when you were when you were taking the and converting it to sound, that temperature? What happened when it disappeared? Did it just
that I don't know exactly if it had any kind of a reaction, because when I was running the thermal camera that converts heat to sound, I was just looping it back to the transmitter, so I wasn't actually data logging that particular piece at the time. And so what we don't know is whether or not we provoked any responses, whether it was looped back, received light, or Carolyn's music, or my music, or or the whales and dolphins that we would sporadically put out there. So it's anyone's guess as to what would have caused that. Right. And then the phenomenon itself, I don't believe it always reacts where you put something out there and then you see something visibly that reacts the same way. It may be a case where you do something and then you return to your daily life and you find something in your kitchen that's completely out of place, or you find something that it doesn't make any sense, and then you start to wonder, maybe that was kind of the response to your intent to communicate.
I'm sorry. Just at the end of the day, you had something and you were tracking it, and it was unusually cold, and then it just disappeared. So there was no tracking it after that. It was obviously there and then gone.
Right. And I do have a piece of footage in regards to that. So this is it.
And check this out. We have a object that it'll appear in the frame.
What is that?
You see that?
Yeah.
What is strange is it's registering cold in the thermal camera. So it's over several pixels, and it has some motion to it. It looks like it rotates or tilts and appears and then dissipates out of the frame.
That's even weirder than the other things you showed me.
Yeah.
And I think it's very weird. If that thing had turned white, I would have just chalked that up as some high energy cosmic ray struck the microbolometer, case closed, walk away from it. Even though that could be anomalous with a variable persistence. But you can't intensify energy on a microbolometer and cause it to get colder. That just doesn't happen. There's no physics explanation.
And also, it just really, it shows up, it rotates. You see a shape, you actually see a shape, and then it's gone.
And then there's multiple pixels too.
Yeah.
And there's variable persistence. So you get a multitude of exclusions of trying to give it a prosaic explanation, such as a camera artifact. If it was just one pixel and it was brown momentarily and it was one frame, I would say, okay, maybe that was an artifact, but let's just ignore it. Because I know when you have an object in front of a microbolometer of a thermal camera, there's a time lag for it to recover its temperature based on what was imaged on it. And that's why you'll get, like, if a bird flies in front of a camera, you'll kind of see usually a little bit of a tailing behind it, because those other microbolometer cells have to recover to the ambient temperature that they're setting at. And no known explanation for this thing other than it was reported and it's anomalous. There's possibility that there's some sort of strange atmospheric phenomenon that causes this.
Right.
Some kind of a thermal vacuum that causes a a freezing moment or something, and it may be related to something external to it, and it could be a new phenomenon that's just atmospheric that hasn't really been reported or discovered, and maybe through repeated experiments it would be discovered.
But
what kind of atmospheric thing? Like, what is that object?
I don't know. That's what I mean.
It doesn't even make sense that it's an
it doesn't make sense, but I mean, just
physical object, right? Because doesn't your camera also pick up the temperature of objects? I think you explained that to me one time.
Oh yeah, if it
reflection off of an object.
Yeah, so I mean, there are other factors to consider in thermography, and this has to do with object emissivity. So if you have an object that's highly reflective, it can actually be warmer than it's indicating its environment, and it'll only reflect the surrounding environment. And this happens like with aerial jets, jets that are at high altitude. Whenever I measure a jet with a thermal camera, it'll always register a commercial jet at, say, at 35,000 feet elevation. It'll always register warmer than its actual environment because it's reflecting back the surface of the Earth back to the thermal camera, so it acts like a mirror. And so many of the anomalous objects I've recorded over the years, the objects register very cold and often down to like minus 75 Fahrenheit. And they would, if they're indicating their environment, then they must be at extremely high altitudes and also very massive in scale, because you can do trigonometry on these videos. I've got one video that I was working with William Puckett of UFOs and W, and when he used to live in Bellevue, I would regularly visit him and show him stuff, and we would do sky watches together. And he looked at this one video that I took of an anomalous V object that measured minus 75, and he's a retired meteorologist, and he says, well, this object was at least 90,000 feet elevation. And I said, well, since we know the elevation, I can do the trigonometry because I knew the camera field of view, and I did the calculations. And according to his data and my measurements, this object, if it were indicating its environment and it was 90,000 feet elevation, it was 2,200 feet across. Wow. So this just makes things even more anomalous. And the thing is, the rule of emissivity or reflectivity in FLIR actually supports what I'm finding, because I can take that rule and move it on both extremes, whether if it's a flat black body source indicating its environment, or if it's a shiny reflective object indicating it's being reflected off of. By applying both extremes, there's no explanation that is acceptable, because obviously we don't accept things that big in our atmosphere.
Right.
And then there's just odd shapes. I mean, shapes that don't make it. I got cylinders. I've got V's with companion objects. I've got solid triangles. And where I'm measuring, it's highly controlled airspace. A lot of this stuff I'm just getting from my own backyard. I've flown a Cessna 172 over my property. I'm very aware of how highly controlled this airspace is. So if somebody says, oh, it's a TR-3B or something, which is apparently omnipresent, it's everywhere, as everybody says, they wouldn't be flying that here near commercial airspace, where we've got SeaTac Airport, we got Renton Field, we got Crest Field, we got Boeing Field. There's many airports within the vicinity, and any experimental craft are not going to be flown within this vicinity. They get taken in other places where we don't see them.
Right. Tom?
No, I just think it's fascinating because it didn't, from what I know about it, it didn't slowly, it didn't slowly warm up. It didn't.
How do you get something to just become cold momentarily and then disappear?
And it actually rotated and then disappeared. Yeah. It wasn't like it slowly warmed up and dropped or something or moved. It was there. It was, recorded. It was seen on multiple frames, correct?
And these cameras were running, for quite some time, and it's something that you would expect it to appear like, oh, if it was a camera artifact or equipment artifact, okay, then you would have a recurring event. Cameras often, even thermal cameras, will get hot pixels or dead pixels, where you can get one that appears to be cold or it appears to be hot, and it just stays in that condition. And it's actually kind of common for that to happen in thermal cameras that are microbolometer based. And you don't have one where it just says, I've got a set of pixels that have gradients, because the gradients indicate you've got splash over where you have something that has mass that's being focused on the microbolometer, and that mass is being dispersed with a gradient, so it splashes over into the other pixels, but not as intense. And that's what separates it, is because if it was just a hot pixel or hot 2 pixels and no gradients surrounding it, then you could say the argument, this is some sort of strange camera artifact, but the gradients is what separates it.
Right. I understand. Sort of. I'm getting there. It's a lot to swallow, but I do understand to a certain extent. What I'm going to say to you is that cold temperature, when we're discussing backstage before the show started, could it be anti-gravity?
I think it's anyone's guess. I mean, it could be the manifestation, but we don't know. Anti-gravity might actually create heat, or it may be manifesting with no measured temperature gradient. Because in order for that temperature to manifest, it had to have like an emissivity, and actually a high emissivity, meaning that for it to be lower in temperature, it had to be more like a black body source. Because if it was a reflective source manifesting, it would have just reflected its environment and probably wouldn't have even shown up on the camera. So like if I was to take a Mylar balloon and put it out at that distance proximity in that zone, it probably would have barely shown up. But if that balloon was a flat black balloon, then it would have just indicated its environment, and maybe that still would have been difficult to. But if it was like, it had to have been like a flat black balloon that suddenly was cold momentarily and just manifested and then disappeared. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And how it just disappeared where it's there and it's gone, we don't see it tailing off anywhere. We don't see it dropping from the sky. It's just there and it's not there.
What do you think, David Altman?
I have no idea what that thing is. I can't even say that I know what it isn't. It's just like, I have no idea. I mean, it's, if people like Dave Mason don't know what it is, don't ask me. That's what I'll say.
I just know what it isn't. I mean, somebody could try to give an explanation.
I know it's not a plane. I know it's not a Pelican. I know it's not a blimp. It's the same thing with the stuff that I filmed on Catalina Island. I have no idea what I saw. I know what it wasn't. Wasn't a helicopter. Wasn't a drone. Only have so many options left.
I always think that if we ever get to see what these things are, like it's just going to go over our heads. I mean, we're not going to understand it, whatever this phenomenon is.
Yeah, and it could be even that. Maybe it's something that we can't even comprehend, which most likely it is.
Right.
We keep struggling with it.
Yeah.
We're grasping at straws, I think.
Yeah, and everybody's getting cameras, which is great. I mean, people that are using their cell phones or doing sky watches, and this is really a great opportunity. And I always encourage people to do that. Start buying gear, do your own sky watches, whether it's by yourself or with friends, and just watch the sky. You're gonna, I guarantee you, if you just stare at the sky.
That's my mom. That's my mom.
You're gonna see stuff that that'll just amaze you. And particularly like if you just buy binoculars or night vision devices or some sort of a recording camera.
Was that your mom, David?
Yeah, that was my mom.
We'll put her back up there again.
Hi, Mom. Funny. You better love the movie.
Yeah.
So, Caroline, what do you think about all of this? All the things that you saw that weren't in the film, what did you feel what was your perspective on them?
Yeah, I was actually really blown away at the amount of stuff that we found because we had so many problems. The weather also didn't cooperate for a while. And so then when I was going through the footage and when we were, deciding and what is this thing and what is that thing, that's what I love about this film, what this film brings to the public is that it's not just your average things. It's, of course, there's some stuff you've seen before, many people have seen before, but also some of the things we've captured, like the one we've been talking about. This is one of my favorite ones. The one shows up, tilts, registers, cold, disappears, just gone. And of course, the wormhole thing and the raining, the dropping objects, that's crazy. And so I started to think that through this work and this movie, we've expanded, I think, the vocabulary, I mean, the conversation, because we not only are talking about the same things, that, drop from the sky or zigzag or whatever. We even have things zigzagging. Actually, you have one coming into frame, zigzag, go out, come back. What is that? So because of what we captured, I started to think and to feel that we've actually made a huge leap forward in trying to understand that this phenomenon, first of all, is a lot bigger and more complex than we think. Um, Also, what I saw convinced me that we are on the right track. And because of what we learned, now we kind of know how to be even more precise, more direct, and so that we can continue to kind of zero in on some of the questions that came up through this film that I think it's going to start giving us some real answers quite sooner rather than later, I think. So that's what inspired me. Of course, I made the film, but as an observer, like you're saying, how did I feel about looking at it? I'm extremely encouraged. And also with David's inventions, he's got other inventions too, of course, and how we're brainstorming to tweak. I think we're going to make another very major leap in the next one because of everything that we found so far.
Hey, real quick, Caroline, can you maybe explain what's happening with the data? Because there's people in the chat room that are asking that question.
Yeah.
Hey, Tim.
The data that's not in the film, right?
Right, just the papers and stuff.
Yeah. So just for people to know that my responsibility as a filmmaker was to show the most credible and amazing data that we collected during that time. And because there was so much more, all the rest belongs to the group, to the UAPX team. It's not my responsibility or the responsibility of anybody else other than UAPX to release, to do whatever they want with the footage that is not in the film. It belongs to them. And so that's why we don't know what their plan is. They mentioned that they were going to release it right after the film, I believe, or something. But it's like I said, it's not my responsibility. So those questions should be directed to that group, the UAPX group. Another part of my responsibility was to sponsor the scientific paper, actually, because the film is an actual scientific investigation. And again, a lot of the science, we weren't going to spend hours and hours. I mean, this is a movie. We were not going to spend hours talking science. Nobody's going to watch the movie, But all the scientific data behind what people see in the movie is part of a scientific paper that the two scientists are writing right now, working on. So I'm still kind of part of that. But the additional data, you guys have to direct your questions as to when or where or how to the UAPX team. And we're not partnering or working together on that.
Right. I do have a question for David Mason in regards to this photograph. What is the piece of equipment on the far right?
That is a log periodic antenna, and it's a broadband antenna. So we were sweeping, on a spectrum analyzer, an RF spectrum analyzer, we were looking at pretty broad spectrum displays. And mostly what I was looking for was not, phenomenon of UAP or UFOs, but rather if we saw something in the sky, it wasn't transmitting frequencies that were known, like, the commercial jets, around I think they're around like 112 megahertz and things. So we were trying to make sure if something came up and then if it popped up on the spectrum analyzer, we'd say, oh, that's a drone frequency or that's a commercial jet. And so it's more of a process of eliminating known objects rather than coming into contact with a UAP, as it would if it were to broadcast.
It's like tracking a graphic equalizer, right?
Yeah, kind of like that. But yeah, it just covers a broad spectrum. But I was using a broad spectrum or an expensive RF spectrum analyzer, but it has very great sensitivity. I think I had the 8563E, I think is what I had in that setup.
Of course it
That
was.
was the model. Yeah.
That was definitely the piece of equipment I've been curious about for quite some time.
Yeah, I've got other antennas as well. I've got what you saw on the rooftop isn't everything that I own. I've got more equipment. And
plus, he's got stuff that you haven't seen that was there that isn't in the movie.
I've got other inventions that haven't been shown or discussed, and so those are things that are going to be around in the next projects.
Okay, Caroline, we spoke to Brittany Barbieri just this last Saturday, and she was making a tie-in to Catalina Island about USOs being sighted there, and that she had information pertaining to that, and she had shared it on UFO Witness. So we tied that interview in with this interview, letting people know about all of you coming on and the fact that you had caught those objects falling from the sky, hitting the water, and then some of them coming back out of the water. Can you explain about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I'll let David Mason talk about this, but from a technical point of view, because we captured these on his FLIR cameras, and this is another very mind-blowing one sighting that I've never seen anywhere before. Also, the fact that it is captured on FLIR means it is not, it wasn't detectable like through the normal vision. So if you looked at the sky, you would see nothing. But through the FLIR cameras, you would see these objects literally dropping down at great speed, dropping down into the water. And when they hit the water, they seem to illuminate the water. And if you look very closely, if you play the movie very, very slowly, you will see that some of these objects are actually coming out of the water. And so, of course, again, the first thing, we think about, it's a camera glitch, but I'll let David Mason tell you why it's not a camera glitch. That's another one of my favorite crazy sighting that I've never seen before, that tells us, that's also correlates with the Tic Tacs, for example, in the sense that they were saying they were dropping at 80,000 miles an hour, hitting the water. Mm-hmm. So that was very similar behavior to those objects that we captured on the FLIR.
Didn't Kevin Day say he had witnessed on the
radar? on the
That
radar.
was his reaction. Yeah, he said they would drop down 80,000 miles within a split second or something like that. And so, yeah, and Gary also, his reaction was like, wow, that's kind of how they were dropping. Except that's what's so fascinating. There was tons of them. Like how many? I don't know how many there were, but it wasn't one or two. I'm talking like they were raining. And that's also what Kevin Day said at one time, that at one point it was raining Tic Tacs. And what's fascinating is that obviously the Navy Tic Tacs were visible to the naked eye. Many people saw it, in addition to it being caught on FLIR and on the radar, but people could just look up and see it. But the ones that we captured just literally dropping down were on the FLIR. So that's kind of interesting. So does that mean that these objects are always there and sometimes we see them, sometimes we don't? It starts to get very intriguing. And but from a technical point of view, I'm not sure if you're interested, but David Mason can explain to you more about that particular clip.
One comment I'm going to make before I switch over to the tech wizard, David Mason, is the fact that Lou Elizondo stated that we do not control our airspace. So in regards to you talking about, are they there all the time? They very well could be.
Yeah.
Well, let me just real quick tell you something. Like when I was doing the research on the area, I talked to fishermen captains. I talked to newspaper people. They introduced me to a guy that works for he's a director for Shark Week, and not to mention, these people have all had sightings, all in this area. Right. Also, I was sent some newspaper articles from the same week as Roswell. It was July 7th, July 7th, 1947. Two Army veterans witnessed flying discs on Catalina Island. So that area has been a hot spot forever.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Can I also say something? I was talking to my friend Travis Taylor, and we were talking about how crazy it was that we were only there for 5 days, and because he said, well, we're on Skinwalker Ranch for months, and you're there for 5 days and you capture all this stuff. So that means either one, you're incredibly lucky, or it's happening all the time. And so I'm thinking it's both. I don't think it was just luck, because the odds of us capturing so much stuff so quickly, like I said, like David said, also there's so much more than what's in the film, tells us that this phenomenon is happening there all the time.
That's pretty much what we talked about last time, was that you were only there for a week and you caught this unbelievable footage. But what intrigues me, if I may, is that you have flare cameras. You're able to document refraction. You have temp or infrared cameras. You have all this unique equipment that other people aren't using. And the idea that you came up with to not only use one or the other, but to team them all up and focus on the same area, that was brilliant, because you're actually capturing this. You're not missing anything. I mean, I'm sure there's some technology that we haven't discovered yet.
And Tom, that's something else. There's data that nobody has even seen yet.
Yeah.
We could have another whole another thing that happens that we don't even know yet. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, but that's what's something to do from everybody else. I mean, other people aren't thinking this, and for David or Mason to be able to still come up with things, and I mean, I'm excited to see what you come up with next. Quite honestly.
Yeah, so that's what's so different about this film, that it has never been done before by civilians anyway, for sure, where you try to focus on one phenomenon, in this case UFOs, and capture it on multiple spectrum, across the spectrum of physics, pretty much. And that's what's missing. Because you see amazing footage on YouTube. I mean, you see very, very crazy things, but it's one camera. It's either CCD or either night vision or this or that. It's never across multiple devices and spectrum at the same time. And so, and the angles as well, the triangulation. So that's why, I mean, this film, even people who are jaded in ufology, you know, should at least recognize that piece, you know, that we thought about it this way and we were able to do it. And again, the next one is even more mind blowing. You're going to be mind blown. You'll see.
Let me do this too. There's been a lot of conversation about crystals and things in the water, different types of rocks or stones, and I think that's where Tim was going with the conversation we had with last weekend. So do you think that might play a part? Do you have any thought on that, or what's in the water or underneath the water, or this idea that crystals might be of interest?
Is this question for?
Yeah, for anybody, for anyone else.
I've never heard of anything like that. Only thing I've ever heard about like minerals is obviously like the 411 stuff, or like the fairy lore and the fae with the granite, having different properties in it as far as for like energy and magnetism, different stones. What's the other one? It's granite and
Quartz. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, Brittany was talking about the quartz, as a lot of people are.
Could be. I mean, who are we to say yes or no? I mean, yeah. It's. I mean, crystals have been around, as far as this area for a long time. So maybe there is a connection. I could be. I don't know.
So David Mason, I'm coming back to you in regards to the objects dropping from the sky. Can you explain that a little bit clearer, please?
Yes. So when I first was examining the clips with the objects that appeared, that as they were dropping, the very first thing I'm thinking is this has got to be some kind of camera artifact. And I slowed the frames down and I saw that there was variable persistence, meaning in order to have variable persistence, it has to be in front of the microbolometer. And because they were sharply focused, that meant they had to be distant objects. So that eliminated camera artifact. Like if you had a single raster line, these were vertical raster lines, not horizontal. So one could say, it's not what you would get like in a conventional video feed. And the one thing that happened that really cemented this thing as anomalous, I had one object that came in at an angle offset with respect to the microbolometer array. So you have an axis of 0 degrees and 90 degrees, and this thing came in at about a 2-degree angle. And I'm going, no, it crossed over. This can't be the sampling of the microbolometer. This has to be the anomalous things. And then the fact that when they were entering, or they appeared to be splashing in the ocean, because when these things were examined closely, we could see luminance where the object would come down and then terminate. And what I also found was very strange is how would an object not appear in other frames and then just suddenly appear and then be elongated unless, it's moving even faster, or it wasn't there as it was falling and then it was suddenly there. It's like it was pulsing in a state where it's visible and then invisible even to FLIR. It's very strange. And then the variable persistence, which if these were just straight lines that showed up in one frame, I would have said camera artifact that I can't explain and just moved on. But the fact there was variable persistence meant that the object had to have been in front of the camera, triggering the microbolometer cells, the decay of the microbolometer cells as a result of this object being in front of the camera and then momentarily gone. Don't know how to explain it. I mean, you can always say anything in a camera is a artifact. And that would be true if you videotaped an airplane going across the sky and it looks like an airplane. One could still say that's a camera artifact and not an airplane. So, it's the same logic that follows, in the debunking process. And it's one of these things, I don't know what it is, I just know what it isn't.
Now, you were filming in what, 4K?
Excuse me?
Were you shooting in 4K? 2K, 1080?
Not in thermography. There's really no such thing. And then one of the things that's to consider in thermal camera use, cameras that have small lenses, so these are the consumer grade ones, are kind of useless in in video because they're going to sample at frame rates between 2 and 7 hertz. Even though they may advertise this camera does 60 hertz, it's not really 60 hertz. It's just they chop it so you think it's 60 hertz. That's why you see some amateur thermal videos where a bird flies across and it leaves a tail, and everybody says it's a UFO, it's a bird, or it's a bug. You have to have cameras that have large diameter objective lenses, so at least 60 millimeter or larger.
Talking optical.
An expensive camera, and then have not too high a resolution. Now, this is the interesting thing. I mean, high resolution is great if you're looking at warmer temperature environments, but if you're going to the cold sky, the large microbolometers that are not as high a resolution would have more quantum efficiency, so you can image colder temperatures. So I'm using a combination of medium resolution and high resolution cameras in the work that I do, so that we can get the best of both worlds.
Sulfuric lenses, high polished.
Yeah, well, no, they use germanium lenses, so you're passing wavelengths where these unusual objects are recorded. I mean, in the temperature spans of like 100 Fahrenheit down to minus 80 Fahrenheit, and which translates to like 12 to 14 microns, or 12,000 to 14,000 nanometer, which is about 15 times longer than the infrared spectrum that we're familiar with, like used in camcorders or home surveillance. So really long wavelengths, and it's kind of a different form of optical physics, but it's still optical physics. But that when you're imaging long wave infrared, it's a very low energy source, and that means you have to have greater quantum efficiency. And this is one of the reasons why thermal cameras are especially the industrial and science grade cameras, are very expensive. And plus that each microbolometer cell has its own calibrated reference, every time they do a flat field or when they do a calibrated temperature span. And this is one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about thermal cameras, is that they think that, how does it measure temperature when it's not touching something? And we can measure temperatures from afar. If it wasn't for the Earth's atmosphere, we could get very accurate temperatures to the greatest distance of the known universe, and that's what we do with the Webb telescope and the Hubble telescope and those kinds of space devices.
And looks for a change.
Really. Yeah, we can measure that. I mean, you can take a cheap $200 consumer grade FLIR camera that goes to your iPhone and look at the moon, and the moon is 240,000 miles nominal distance. That's pretty far, and it still picks up the moon. Or you can measure a cold snowbank. And so people think thermal cameras can only measure heat, but they can measure cold temperatures.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of misconceptions about it. I put a YouTube video up about explaining these common misconceptions, and I've been getting a lot of feedback. People really like it because Hollywood has kind of contaminated that. There's just a lot of false information about thermal cameras that misleads consumers and misleads people's understanding of the technology.
So if people want information about cameras, check out David Mason. David, where can you be found online?
I'm on YouTube. You could just search my name. I'm wearing I was flying a Cessna. This was a photo about 10 years ago. I didn't have a beard. I just had a mustache. And so I was taking Cessna lessons. And so that's the image. And I just got some YouTube videos talking about cameras. My parrot playing guitar. You can look at that video. So I've just got an assortment of videos on YouTube, and I'm also on Facebook. But those are the two social media platforms that I'm on.
David, where can people find you?
I am on Twitter at David H. Altman, Instagram, David Henry Altman, and Facebook, David H. Altman.
Also, just a shout out to Cory Feldman for allowing David Altman to actually broadcast from his private home. So thank you, Cory.
I'll let him know.
Yeah.
All righty. And what about you, Caroline? Where can they find you?
Oh my gosh, I'm everywhere on all the social medias. They can just Google my name. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. But specifically for the movie, people can go to the website atearinthesky.com, and they can send a message from there if they want to. But also they can look for updates on the project, and they can see all the platforms where it's shown. It's on Amazon, but also a bunch of other platforms. So the best way is to go to atearinthesky.com.
Didn't you also hit #1 on Amazon?
We were #2 on the iTunes chart on the first day, and we stayed like top 5 for like 2 months. We were #2 and then down to 3 and back to 2 for like a couple of months. So it did very, very, very well. It was in a bestseller also on Amazon, and so it continues to do very well. But you know what? It's we still have to keep spreading the word. People sometimes watch the trailer, they say, oh, I really want to watch this, and then they get busy, then they have to, you have to keep reminding them. So especially that I feel this film is part of this disclosure. I really think so, because when the government comes out and tells us we don't have data, we haven't collected anything, and we are civilians putting out all this data and showing how it is done, it can be done, it should be done. It's kind of pushing the government officials to stop saying that, because because we're out there doing it. So I feel like that's why us as civilians and ufologists, we need to help each other out and keep putting this information out and encouraging many, many people to watch it, especially in the mainstream. That's how I got William Shatner and Michio Kaku to help with the mainstream as well. So hopefully that's happening.
I think it will. One thing I got to say is, I guess Caroline and David Mason have to leave. So we honored the fact that they could only stay for an hour. So if you guys got to go, you can.
Yeah.
And we thank you very much for your time and your presence here tonight. But David Altman, we want to keep you around.
Yeah, I'll stay for a few more minutes. My back is killing me. I'm sitting on a weight bench, and it's like there's no back on it, and that's why I'm moving around so much, and I'm on the Goonies pillow. It's awful. I'm in a corner.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Caroline.
Awesome. I so appreciate everything you guys are doing. Thank you so much, because we got to work together and make this happen and get out there. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Caroline, for being here.
Ready to watch it.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun. And
all right, I'll talk to you guys later, Dave. Caroline, have a good night.
Okay. Bye, guys. Bye,
Good night, guys.
Now it's the Dave show.
No, it's the Dave Altman show. Yeah.
No. Come back.
All righty, now we can focus mainly on David Altman. So,
here we go.
If you guys in the chat room have any questions for David Altman, please post them, and we will try to get them to him. Tom, you got a question for David?
Well, actually, I had it for the other day, but in general, we talked about a couple of things early on. We talked about reaching out language, trying to communicate. And there was a comment made about, computers are changing all the time and that kind of thing. But, we've got different languages. We've got COBOL, we've got Fortran, but every computer basically operates on binary, and it always has. So I'm wondering if the binary language might not be the best way to try to communicate with.
The only thing that I know about binary is what Jim Peniston said about the Rendlesham thing. I'm not the one to ask about that. I'm not a scientist. I know a little bit from what I've learned from people that I work with, but that stuff is just like,
Yeah. Well, binary is the backbone.
I kind of know what it is, but as far as communication goes with another race of whatever and us, the only thing I've ever heard as far as binary is that one thing with Rendlesham, which is another controversial thing as that is, as that was.
I got you.
Right.
And then, of course, I loved Star Trek 4.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say I'm a big fan of the Goonies. So
did you see the
Yeah,
Did
I
you
saw
see
the pillow.
pillow?
You have
Yeah.
got to tell him that UFO Man Online loves his Goonie pillow.
I will. He might. You
All
never
right.
know. He might pop in. I doubt it though. I don't even know if he's home.
Well, he's more than welcome to pop on if you want.
Yeah.
It'd be good to see him again, you know. Anyways, David, I have to say that your involvement with initially with UAPX during the film, what was your role really during the research? What was your role?
Is just the research or the whole movie?
The whole, well, no, not the whole movie, because that's kind of like an encapsulation of what happened. But what I'm saying,
Well, no, I meant behind the scenes. That's what I
yeah,
meant.
what did you do behind the scenes at during the film and the research? Yes.
Well, the research I did, I started that very early on when I joined UAPX on Catalina, and then I got hired to work on a show for Discovery Channel called Expedition X, and I did the 2 Catalina Island episodes. So that's when I really did my deep dive, and then everything that I had, it just kind of accumulated, you know. So,
Right.
I mean, you gotta look at the Battle of Los Angeles. You know, you got to look at different sightings. Anything that you hear a connection to Catalina Island is a breadcrumb. There was some stuff put out by Kit Green about Catalina Island, which I looked into, and then you have also Lou Elizondo talking about
Right.
Catalina Island a lot. So, I mean, if you look into it, you'll find all sorts of stuff. Not to mention, you know, the giants that are buried out there. You know, I looked into that when I was out there. I talked to a bunch of people about that, and you know, this one guy that I met, he's the editor of the Catalina Island newspaper, Jim Watson. He came across so many weird experiences that people were having out there that he put out a whole book on it called Mysterious Catalina Island. It's a great book.
We have a question for you from the chat. In that picture with the telescope on the far right, was that?
That's a Dave Mason question.
It was manufactured by Dave Mason. Okay.
No, I don't know which one they're talking about on the far right.
The big white one. In fact, I'll show you what that was. An antenna, actually. It wasn't a camera.
I would see. I wasn't even. I never even saw that stuff. I was on Catalina Island, and they were on Laguna.
Right.
So I never put my hands on any of that equipment. I had some equipment of Mason's on Catalina.
That was a graphic analyzer. It's kind of like, you know, an EQ for a stereo.
Well, but whether it was made or manufactured, I have no idea. You know,
I think he probably made it because I don't
probably knowing
Yeah.
Dave, he made it. You know,
Yeah,
but I
I
don't know.
don't see those very often.
Right.
Sorry.
It wasn't a camera either, Snoopson. It
Yeah.
was more of an antenna.
Right.
Well, it was a graphic analyzer.
Right. Graphic analyzer. Gotcha. So some of the things that you learned on Catalina Island were definitely indicative of an ongoing, what's the word?
Activity.
Not encounter, but activity from way back.
Right. I personally think that and this is my opinion only, that whatever is out there either lives under the ocean and it's from someplace else, or it lives under the ocean and it's always been here, and we just can't always see it. That's what I think.
Right.
I don't think it's little green men from space coming down to get soil samples. I think it's something else, and it's something that either has always been here or lives here now under the water.
I've heard reports of creatures living under the water. We heard it from Brittany Barbieri last week, and then
that Ben Hansen worked on our movie.
Yes, I do know that.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if not too many people know that. Yeah.
Yeah, Ben. We're trying to get Ben on the channel, so we'll see.
Brittany will make that happen.
Brittany's cool.
If not, I'll give him a call.
Ben texted me yesterday. I could
okay, cool. Then you're good.
Yeah.
You know, believe it or not, we have some new connections now. Tom and I collaborate on a massive scale, actually, right now, and we plan to keep it going. And what I can do with the platform will help him, and what he can do with connections helps me. So that's really cool. And the fact that I know you, David Altman, is very cool. And I have to thank you publicly for joining my UFO Man group on Facebook.
Not a problem.
Anyways,
Not a problem.
Paranormal Underworld says, UFO Man, hey Tim, you have a question from Hides in the Long Grass. Okay, where is it? I gotta find it. Has MUFON contacted UAPX regarding standardizing data?
I'm not a member of UAPX, so I don't know. You'd have to ask them.
Right.
I'm a former member.
Right.
What
They
are
do,
you working on now, Dave?
What's that?
What are you working on now? What's tomorrow? What are you guys going on?
I have a couple of TV shows I'm working on, and I'm going to be on the road with Cory for the next month and a half. I got a couple of things cooking.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Can you name the TV shows or no?
They're shows that I'm developing with somebody, so it's nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. One's like an adult version of Scooby Doo, real life,
Okay.
and
That'd be cool.
another one. It's more science based. I'll put it that way.
Cool.
And then I have a true crime thing I'm working on as well.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
But this is your passion, though, right?
Yeah, this is what I know. This is what I've always been into.
We think it's really awesome that you have involved yourself in the UFO field.
It wasn't on purpose. It just happened.
We need people to promote the message because the message lately seems to be getting lost among all the ego and
Yeah.
competition.
But that's always been here, man. That's always been here. Like a lot of what I'm into is the older stuff, like from the 50s, the contactee movement, the 60s. I love all the Long John Neville stuff, and I also love like the 90s and 80s stuff with like from Art Bell. I live on that stuff. And
Right.
if you go back and you listen to Art Bell episodes from the 90s, you'll hear the same things that are happening now. Not even with the egos and the infighting, but even how they thought it's disclosure and we've got materials and we've got this, and it's the same thing repeating itself.
Paranormal Underworld wants to know if you're working on anything paranormal. I'm interested.
Well, yes. I can say that. Yes.
Okay, then we'll look forward to.
That's all I can really say right now.
We'll look forward to hearing from you in that regard because Paranormal Underworld is a good friend of mine. His name is Jax. He's been on our show several times, and he has 30 plus years of paranormal researching experience. And
awesome.
In my opinion, he's one of the top credible researchers in the United States, if not the world.
Very cool.
So if you ever get a chance to talk to him, he's someone you should consider. Anyways, I want to thank you, David, for coming this evening. I really do want to thank you for being here and bringing David Mason.
Sure, anytime.
And getting Caroline Cory to come as well. We really appreciate it.
And we appreciate you having us.
Tom, any last comments?
No, I just it's nice to know that Dave also has an interest in the underwater aspect of this, because I think that you and I have talked about this.
Oh, Tom, if you're interested in that, have you ever seen the Russian documentary on USOs?
No,
I have.
The Croakers. I'll send it to you.
The Croakers are awesome.
Let me tell you, man, that could be a whole show in itself, and I don't even want to get into it. My back's killing me, but that's something to check out.
The ghost submarines, too. The ones that are clocking at like 800 knots. 1,000 knots.
Pretty much. I'll give you a quick synopsis. It's a documentary. It's like an hour long, and it's all of these ex-Russian submarine captains and officers that are now talking about stuff that they've encountered underwater.
Love it.
and how nuclear war was almost inevitable because they thought these things were chasing them and us. So the Russians thought it was us, and we thought it was the Russians.
Holy cow!
And
Yeah.
they didn't compare notes until years later, and they're like, same thing happened to us.
And that's a current documentary. Or is this one that was?
It came out in the 90s.
Came out in the 90s.
Maybe early 2000. I'll find it.
Yeah,
they're saying the sound they heard in the water sounded like a croak.
It sounds like a frog croaking, so they called them croakers.
Okay.
Right.
One more question for you before I go.
Sure.
Before you go. So one of the things that we didn't touch on tonight was the speed of these things. So do you, for the listeners, do you have anything that documented the speed of anything that took place during this week's film?
I haven't. I haven't really heard them talk about much unless they, obviously they don't have a radar gun on it, but they're able to figure it out by height and all that stuff.
Yeah, sure.
That's probably going to come out with the data, hopefully.
I heard 20,000 miles an hour. Didn't we hear something like that?
No, Caroline Cory said that when the objects were raining from the sky, they were traveling at 80,000 miles an hour.
80,000. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fast. All right. Okay.
So we did have some speed.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna watch the movie again tonight, and
I'm looking for that documentary before I forget.
Popcorn, and I'm all set. So I'm gonna watch it right after this show. I'm gonna put on primetime.
Awesome.
Just if you can put the link into the chat room.
I can't. I can't.
Oh, you
I'm
can't.
I'm not a mod. You have to do it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can do it. I'll make you a mod. Anyways, thank you very much for coming, David.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom, for being here. And from all of us on the panel, good night and good evening.
Good night, everybody.